This term blesser is a term that refers to mostly a transactional relationship between young women and older men. The older men in this situation are known as the blessers, and the young women, I suppose, as the blessees. It's something that's a phenomenon that has grown over many years here in South Africa. And a recent national study reveals that the serious harm that blesser relationships can inflict on young women in these relationships with much older, wealthier men who provide money, who provide gifts, lifestyle benefits in exchange for sex and other benefits as well. While such arrangements may carry the appearance of opportunity and status, the research has shown that this introduction of this is deeply entrenched. Risks include HIV infection, that's a huge risk here in South Africa, especially unintended pregnancy, intimate partner violence. I mean, we've been speaking about gender-based violence so often here on the show and on Channel Africa as a whole, and this is something that has a huge impact because it diminishes bargaining power in sexual decision making as well. We're speaking about this particular study unpacking the impacts of exploitative dynamics on health, agency, and young women's long-term well-being. Joining us on the line is Professor Gavin George, Program Leader of Health Economics and HIV and AIDS Research Division at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you so much, Professor George, for your time this morning.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's define these relationships, because it sounds a little bit like the norm these days, doesn't it? That younger women would, of course, want to have relationships or be in relationships with older men. We've seen it for many generations. In fact, many of our households, when we look at the dynamics, our mothers have always been a little younger than our fathers. So we're like, why is this different and why does it have a different name? But let's actually define what blesser relationships look like and what kind of dynamics they play.
Yeah, well, first up, I mean, just a slight correction from your great introduction. I think you've said a lot and you raised some really, really important points during that introduction. The point about these men being much older, I think, yes, a large proportion of these men can be a lot older. But what we're finding is that actually a large portion of these men can also be same or similar age as well. There are a lot of younger men who are assuming the role of blessers. They now come into money and they are happy to use that money and spend that money on girls. And I think you mentioned the blesser relationship is a form of transactional sex. However, this is far more implicit. There is no sort of explicit contracting. You give me this amount of money and I will then give you sex in return. I think it's a far more implicit arrangement whereby there is a relationship between a man and a woman. It oftentimes is age disparate, and by age disparate, where the man is more than 5 years older than the female partner, and they have this usually a longer term standing arrangement where these men of means look after women who are looking for money for a variety of reasons, whether it's for sort of more basic items like food and clothing, right the way through to, a different, more upmarket lifestyle.
I think that is quite surprising, that dynamic that a blesser doesn't have to be older, because I think as society, that's what we think, right? A blesser has to be an old man. But essentially, it isn't really an age dynamic, if I'm hearing you correctly. It's more a power dynamic of money and power, and how that money and power is used to have a transactional relationship between these two individuals who are in this dynamic. But then one would say, hey, the people who are in this dynamic have chosen to be in it. These young women, or even if they're not younger, these women choose to be in these relationships, maybe because they can see the benefit of having someone who can provide money or stability, or money for whatever reason, even if it's luxury and lifestyle, into their lives. Why is this an unfair power dynamic?
Well, look, I think we can't get away from the fact that, South Africa's extreme inequality means that young women grow up in a world where wealth is very visible, but oftentimes very inaccessible. And you add to that the significant rates of youth unemployment, especially for women. And the formal economy simply isn't delivering opportunities at the speed that young people need and crave. And it's within this context that a blesser relationship looks like a shortcut. It offers money, stability, this sort of social visibility and access to a lifestyle that they can't reach through work or through tertiary education. But as I've mentioned, we cannot assume that blessed relationships are only about poverty. And I want to reiterate that point. Mm-hmm. Our research shows that it's more complicated than that. Yes, extreme inequality and youth unemployment do create the conditions where some young women feel that there are few options when jobs are scarce and the cost of living is high.
Yeah.
This relationship with a wealthier man can look like a way to stay in university or help a family member or simply get by. But aspiration, and I want to use and really focus on that word, aspiration plays a big role here too, and it often gets missed. Young women are not only trying to survive, many are trying to belong, to be visible, and to feel that they are part of the same world they see online, in their communities and among their peers. So in a society where wealth and lifestyle are constantly displayed, the pressure to look the part is enormous. And for some, a blessed relationship becomes a shortcut to that sense of status and recognition.
Yeah. And although the blesser culture isn't a new phenomenon, I'm glad this study is recent because it can bring in that very new dynamic of social media and the online world and what role it plays in this aspiration that you speak of that can lead women into this blesser culture. Were you able to connect the two in your study, the social media as well as this aspiration that women then go into the blesser relationships for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I recall quite vividly when I was speaking to a group of young women. One of them said to me along the lines of, Prof, if you want to look good on Instagram, you basically need a blesser. And I think everyone in the room laughed. But it captures the deeper truth. The pull of the status and the lifestyle can be really strong, can be really seductive. So what starts off looking glamorous online can hide the real risks underneath. And that is why, essentially, that's what women find out, oftentimes much later within that relationship.
Well, let's take a break, Prof. We're going to take a short break and come back. I'd love to look at the dynamics of transactional relationships and the real impacts that were shown through the study that you were a part of. Stay on the line. We'll continue speaking about this after the break. The real and true impacts of blesser relationships on young women. Stay with us.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are. With our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Le monde entier a les yeux rivés sur Johannesburg. Les dirigeants des plus grandes économies mondiales se réunissent pour prendre des décisions qui façonneront les nations, les marchés et l'avenir. Vous savez déjà que Channel Africa sera sur place pour vous proposer des débats, des analyses et des points de vue essentiels. Suivez le sommet du G20 les 22 et 23 novembre en direct de l'Afrique. Restez connectés sur Channel Africa.
Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau on the move.
We are unpacking the impact of the exploitative dynamics of blesser relationships on the health, agency, and long-term well-being of young women in South Africa through a study. The person who's part of the study is Professor Gavin, who's joining us on the line. He's the program leader of Health Economics and HIV and AIDS Research Division at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Let's continue this conversation. At the core of these blesser relationship is the transactional nature of these relationships. Maybe quickly, let's try and navigate and explain what a transactional relationship looks like, and then go deeper in why this leads to the impacts that I have mentioned earlier.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, many of these relationships are implicit. So there's no explicit exchange of money for a particular act. And I think that that's important. But it also leads to this sort of this power dynamic. So when the wealthier partner is the one who pays the bills and provides transport or supports education, essentially he holds a lot of control, even if the relationship doesn't look abusive on the surface. So that imbalance makes it incredibly difficult for young women, and this is where the real risk comes in for young women. So it makes it difficult for them to insist on safer sex practices or refuse sex, or to leave if they ever feel unsafe. Many of the young women tell us that they fear losing that financial support. So they do feel somewhat trapped in these relationships. They fear losing status or even provoking violence if they challenge the older partner's terms. So I think that negotiation is key, and oftentimes these young women have to play this balancing act, the reward on the one hand and the risk on the other hand. So it's quite something for them to navigate.
I'm glad that you mentioned the term negotiation, because many of us don't think about this in our everyday relationships that aren't obviously blesser relationships, that you actually have the power to negotiate through various aspects of the relationship itself. And sometimes, as you said, even without it being forceful, there is a diminishing of this negotiation in these blesser relationships. What are some of the biggest impacts of the lack of being able to negotiate as a woman in this dynamic?
Well, increased risk, essentially. And I think this is where a lot of our sort of public health programs oftentimes fail, and some of our interventions that we try and implement. So, for example, some of our public health campaigns often say, just negotiate condom use. But the reality is that negotiation isn't really realistic when one person holds all the power. So that economic dependence and that at times age hierarchy can create the conditions where young women's voices are somewhat muted long before they step into that relationship. So negotiation becomes quite challenging from that perspective.
You know, what I really love about research is that it's not just about the problem. You guys have gone out there, you've spoken to these young women, you've understood the dynamics and the impacts thereof. But we do have to ask the question, what can we do about something like this? It's not like blesser culture will be gone in the next year or two. It's going to stay here because these power dynamics still remain. And although women are becoming a little bit more empowered, it's still not at the levels that we need to see all across the world. What do we do about this?
I think that's a great question, and I may not be able to provide an adequate solution. Look, the reality is these relationships have been, transactional sex has been around a long time.
Yes.
The blesser phenomenon is fairly recent, but it's been around for a fair bit of time, and you're absolutely right. I think there'll always be a demand and supply of blessers. But I think one of the points that I want to make is that we certainly need to move away from blaming young women. And instead, we need to at least attempt to change the world around them so that safer options actually exist. And that starts with economic pathways. And sometimes this is overused, I get it. Talking about real youth employment programs, yes, it's easier to say than to actually implement. Things like entrepreneurship support and opportunities that give young women an income of their own, an adequate income as well. So real, proper employment. But also, we need stronger social systems, especially, and you've mentioned it, you've stated before that your show has focused a lot around gender-based violence. I think many young women stay in harmful relationships because they don't feel they're believed or protected if things do go wrong. So we need accessible GBV services, safe houses, counseling, and community-based support networks that young people can turn to without fear or stigma. Making sure that support is visible and reliable so that they are able to leave these sort of dangerous relationships. And then education. Education is key, and schools potentially have a significant role to play, not just teaching biology, but women's rights, your sexual and reproductive health rights. Teaching, it's about relationships and emotional skills. But I don't want you to walk away to think that all the focus and attention needs to be placed on women, because I think that we need to engage with men. Men play a vital role. Let's not exclude them from the discussion. We have to challenge the norms that normalize control, entitlements, these sort of age disparate relationships, especially in environments where alcohol and violence are already part of this risk landscape, if you will. So the goal it should never be about policing young women's choices. We've got to make a concerted effort, I think, to create alternatives, protection, and restore dignity so that no one has to trade safety for survival or for status.
Well, I think we might leave it there, but just really quickly before we go, where can we go to find out a little bit more about this research? But also, I'm very, very interested in the other aspect of this, because this is not just a young woman problem. It's a societal problem that we're seeing, and almost like a societal impact that we're seeing in our everyday communities, how young boys are growing up, how young women are growing up, and the things that we continue to teach people and continue to become a norm in our communities. Keep these kind of cultures, on a revolving wheel that's it's sort of never ending. And so I'm glad that you mentioned education in this, because it's the most important part, and not leaving men behind in the educational aspect, because we need to get in there in these deeply entrenched societal conversations and norms that aren't really changing. Even though we're having a lot of conversations, we still continue to see the same things exist in our society. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Let me know where we can find this research and perhaps engage more in this conversation, Professor.
Yeah, I mean, some very important points that you've made. This is part of a program of work that we've been involved in. Obviously, you drew this work from a piece that we published in The Conversation, but we've also got a number of academic journal articles that have been published, both qualitative and quantitative, which really provides with the holistic picture of the problem and the richness that you get from the qualitative data. And people are welcome to reach out to me. I'm on social media. You can reach me on LinkedIn. There's our website, her.org.za, that you can get these research papers on. And then mainstream media has reported quite extensively on this particular issue. So there's a lot of information, a lot of academic material that is available. And of course, people are welcome to reach out to me to engage further on a topic which I think is important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Professor Gavin George, Program Leader of Health Economics and HIV and AIDS Research Division at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, speaking about the impact of the exploitative dynamics of blesser relationships on young women.